guys, it's Justine and little Dax here from I Should Read That, and today we are bringing you my April book haul. Hold on, she's tangled up. Come on, brand new jumper, Dax, be gentle. So, April, hauling books. That was a bit of a disaster. I have been really good about sticking to a book budget for the first 3 months of the year, and then April 12th happened and bookstores reopened. It was a magical day. I went to the bookstore 4 times in 1 week. Basically, I have been dreading doing this book haul, not because of like accountability, because I'm totally thrilled to show you all of the stuff that I bought because I'm really excited for everything, but because like the idea of trying to figure out what all of these books are about to explain to you guys is going to take 3 hours. I'm really not excited. So here's what's going to happen. I am going to very briefly talk about all of these books because there are a lot of them. I have not counted them yet. I have read a couple of these, so where they are in my April wrap up, I will let you know so you can go and hear my thoughts about them there. As per usual, links to everything will be down below. I'm really sorry. I will stop being lazy with BookTube here soon, but today is not that day, and I need to shelve this stuff because, as I mentioned in some other video that I've already filmed today, stacks are everywhere. The cats have knocked them over several times. A stack of books fell on Sophia. She's absolutely fine. It was her own fault. She likes to rub her face on stuff and just, it fell on her. This room was a mess, and I need to get the stuff onto shelves. So I'm gonna run through these super quick. I'm not gonna bother with my NetGalley books because I don't think I have very many of them. We're just gonna get through some physical books here, you guys. Come on this journey of anxiety with me. So as per usual, I'm gonna divide these up into books that I received from publishers and then books that I bought for myself or was gifted or whatever. This month I only have 3 physical books from publishers, so I'm just gonna run through them really quick. First up, we have The Broken God by Gareth Hanrahan. This comes out in May, and I am so excited. I'm so excited. This was actually meant to be in my May TBR, but it was in my book haul pile, so I forgot to mention it. It's the 3rd book in the Black Iron Legacy series, and it's one of my favorite series ever. You may remember The Gutter Prayer being tied for #1 as my favorite book of 2019. The 2nd book is amazing too. I'm really looking forward to this. I just love this series so much. I will put a link to this below, but really you should check out the description for The Gutter Prayer if you've not read it yet, because it is one of the weirdest, most wonderful, inventive, fresh, and unique fantasy books I've read in ages. It's kind of urban fantasy for a land that doesn't really exist, for a city that doesn't really exist, but he does such a good job of building up this city. It's one of those books where you really feel like the city itself is a character in the book. So in that first book, we basically have 3 thieves who are sent out on a job. Everything goes horribly wrong and just kick-starts this huge series of events. It's so good. You guys should really read the series if you haven't yet. Next up, I have a book that is out now. This is Lycanthropy and Other Chronic Illnesses by Kristen O'Neill. This is a contemporary set YA book, which is usually not my thing, but this sounded so fun. So basically, we have a character who is diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, and she joins an online forum for people who experience chronic illness, and she makes a friend, her best friend, Bridget, who's also in this forum, but she's never met in real life. Bridget seems to disappear from online, so she goes over to her house, finds out that Bridget is actually a werewolf. This sounds so fun. I'm really looking forward to picking this up. I was meant to read it last week, but life just got away from me a little bit, so this is what I'm hoping to read really soon. And last but not least for publishers, I received a copy of Master Artificer by Justin Call. This is the sequel to Master of Sorrows, which came out I think in 2019 and was so fun. I really enjoyed it, despite the fact that it's a fantasy book with a teenage male protagonist. The fact that I enjoyed that shows you how good that book is, because that is not my thing whatsoever. But that first book is like such incredibly fun. Like, it's like a throwback to classic fantasy, like all the really good stuff we all enjoyed as teenagers, like the Belgariad and sort of those kinds of like quest books. But it's got like women in it, so it feels like it has like a modern twist. So if you were really missing those kinds of books like Raymond E. Feist or what's the name of the guy who wrote the Belgariad? I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you really like those books, you should give this series a try because it's just so much fun. The rest of this haul is stuff that I bought for myself, so buckle up, guys. First up, I have 4 books that I've actually already read. They're in my April wrap-up, so you can learn a little bit more about them there. Those are The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which I gave, I believe, 3 stars. I struggled with this book a little bit, but at the same time, I really enjoyed certain aspects of it. It's all about mental health, and there's some content warnings that go with this, so definitely check that out before you get started. I have House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I loved this. I went in knowing nothing except for the fact that it had a really nice cover. It's YA horror, it's body horror, it's so good. It's like nature horror. I loved this. This totally took me by surprise. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Also in April, I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a kind of, almost like a slice of life contemporary book set in Japan in a cafe in which one of the seats in the cafe is rumored to be able to send you to the past. There are a bunch of rules for this time travel, but some people do end up taking them up on this offer, and this is split into 4 stories of 4 people who decide to use this time traveling capability. I loved this. I thought this was so good. It's just one of those stories you can sink into and really lose yourself in. And there's a second one which I will definitely be picking up. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I hated this when I first read it. I ended up rereading it because, as I say in my April wrap-up, I want to understand like the references on Book Talk, and I ended up actually really enjoying it this time around. It's like the perfect trashy pandemic read. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, I'm just going to be grabbing stuff off of this stack and zipping through them really fast. Sorry for being kind of like rushed and not very good in this video, but like I need to get the stuff up off the floor. So first things first, I picked up Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig, although I have mentioned that I do have problems with Matt Haig. I love this book. This is a nonfiction book about mental health. I lent my copy to someone about 3 years ago and never got it back, and I've been really wanting to get one ever since, so I just picked it up. This is really fabulous, even if you think he's a bit of a wank like I do. Then I have The Siren by Kira Cass. Kira Cass is like the ultimate trash author for me. As you'll see later, I haul the entire selection series, and I figured I'd chuck this one in too. Why not? I think she's maybe a mermaid. I think he's maybe not a mermaid, and there's some romance. I'm really looking forward to it. Great pandemic reading. Then we have Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is a book that is hugely popular. I know nothing about it except I've heard about it everywhere. It is everywhere. Everyone seems to have read this book. They say it's wonderful. It was buy one get one half price at Waterstones. Something about 1969 and a kind of misfit girl called the Marsh Girl. A handsome young man is found dead. She's immediately suspected, but she's not what they say. Sounds great. I'm definitely going to be reading it. The other book in the buy one get one half price when I got Where the Crawdads Sing is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I tried to listen to Station 11, which is her debut book, and it was not my thing, but I'm actually have that from the library, gonna give that another try, and I wanted to give this a try as well because I've heard so many people absolutely love her stuff. I think the audiobook was just not really for me, and I listened to it early on in my audiobook days where I didn't quite figure out that sometimes a narrator just doesn't work. I can't really tell what this book is going to be kind of like about and what sort of genre it falls in. Is it contemporary? Does it have fantasy elements? Is it kind of fabulism? I don't really know. But we have a character named Vincent who is a bartender at this hotel. A wealthy financier named Jonathan walks in, hands in his card, begins their life together. But that same night there's a hooded figure scrawling notes on the windowed wall of the hotel. Why don't you swallow broken glass? And a shipping executive at the bar sees this and is totally shaken to his core. So a lot of stuff is revealed. It sounds great. I don't really know exactly what this is about, but hey, I've heard great things about her books, so I want to give her a try. Then I have The House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is her new gigantic, supposedly adult, although I think all of her books are quite adult, book. I picked up Court of Thorns and Roses, as I've just mentioned, and I figured, you know what, why not? Again, I want to understand the jokes, I want to understand the references. Apparently I should read this after reading a bit more of her other 2 series, because I guess there's like throwbacks or something. But I think this is like an urban fantasy for like a city that doesn't exist. There's like murder, there's steamy romance, there's all that good stuff. So we'll see how this is. Then I have the second and third books for N.K. Jemison's, I think it's 100,000 Kingdoms series. I have the first one. My friend was unhauling these 2, so I decided to pick them up. I love N.K. Jemisin. I don't know anything about this series, and I'm not gonna look before I start, but I trust her. So now I have the entire trilogy for whenever I decide to pick it up, which hopefully will be soon. The next book that I have was gifted to me very kindly by my friend Imi, who is just the best. So this is The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. I really enjoy her YA crime books. I've read 2 of her now 4 books, this being the 4th one, and I am very curious about this. Apparently this follows the Story family, who are fabulous and wealthy, and everything kind of falls apart. I guess they're ditched by their mother. Apparently many years later, these cousins end up receiving an invitation to visit their grandmother's resort, but they don't actually really know their grandmother at all. I assume family secrets and lies are gonna come out. Sounds great. I think that she's really fun. Then, as mentioned, I have the entire Selection series. This is like my pure peak trash series. I've actually only read the original trilogy, and I devoured it. I tore through it. This is like perfect material for breaking a reading slump. It's the perfect thing to read in a pandemic. I love these books, even though they are objectively, they're not good. And I apologize to anyone who really loves these, but like, to me, they are objectively not good. But I'm really thrilled to have all of these. I'm gonna reread the original trilogy, and then I'm gonna reread the 2 like follow-ups. I think one is like a sequel that follows the daughter of the 2 characters who get together in the Selection, and then one is maybe like short stories or something like that. I don't know. I'm gonna be reading these very soon, and maybe I'll save them for like anxiety days, or maybe I'll read them very soon. I don't really know yet, but maybe I'll vlog it. All right, reaching down for another stack of books, I picked up Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This is a book I've really been wanting to pick up for ages. I've heard such incredibly good things about it. It is about a Black woman who is babysitting a white child, and she's basically accused in a supermarket of kidnapping this child. And the girl's mother, Alex, her employer, decides that she is going to make things right using kind of white feminism, probably her blog and whatnot. This sounds really great. It sounds like a really interesting and compelling read. It was longlisted for the Booker Prize last year. And again, I've heard a lot about this, and I'm pretty sure all of it has been really good. I think it's going to be really interesting. Next up, I have a nonfiction book. This is Hallie Rubenhold's The Covent Garden Ladies. I really love The Five, which is her book about the canonical 5 victims of Jack the Ripper. And this is about a basically a book that was published in 1757 that published the names of the sex workers and their sort of specialties that worked in Covent Garden in London, and it sort of investigates the people who were impacted by this and sort of like the lives of these women and sort of how they lived and died by profit. It sounds so incredibly interesting. This was recommended to me on TikTok. Another book that was recommended to me on TikTok by one of my friends, this is Dead Space by Callie Wallace. This is, I'm not sure if it's YA or not, but it's a sci-fi horror book, and it sounds really interesting. Sci-fi horror is not something I have read a lot of, but it is something I am very much interested in. So apparently this book follows an investigator who must solve a brutal murder on the claustrophobic space station in this tense sci-fi thriller. So we follow a character named Hester, and she was a victim of a terrorist attack that left her really badly injured and indebted and stranded from home, so she has to take kind of dead-end security jobs. And someone from her past ends up coming back with information about this attack, but I believe they're murdered, so she has to investigate what happened. This sounds great. It sounds really interesting. I'm very curious. Another book that's from the same unhaul pile where I got the second 2 books in the 100,000 Kingdoms series, the N.K. Jemisin series, is The Jewel by Amy Ewing. This sounds like it's going to be very much in the same vein as the Selection. It's older YA. It's probably going to be tropey and ridiculous, but I'm totally here for it. So I guess this is about a girl who's auctioned off as a surrogate to this woman named the Duchess, and she's kind of locked up in the palace, and she's going to have to bear this woman's child for her, which sounds really creepy. But then she meets another captive, Ash, who is the handsome royal companion, and they're drawn together in this game of court politics. It sounds really fun. I think this is going to be another really good pandemic read. Okay, now we're getting to the hardcovers, which is quite heavy. It's a good thing Dax isn't on my lap anymore because she would be squished. I have Near the Bone by Christina Henry. She's one of my favorite horror authors. I read The Ghost Tree last year and really loved it, and I've read some of her sort of retelling. So I read Lost Boy, which is a retelling of Peter Pan, and I read The Mermaid, which is kind of a reimagining of sort of the myth of the Fiji mermaid and P.T. Barnum. This is like a out and out horror book, much like The Ghost Tree. She's one of those authors that I kind of don't really need to know anything about the book in order to buy it, because I'm just gonna buy her horror anyway. But I believe this is a book that takes place kind of in the mountains, and there's a monster and there are these people hunting this monster. We have this main character who's probably gonna get caught up in the middle somehow. It looks great. I'm really excited for this. I think she's so good. Then we have another gifted book from someone that I am friends with on TikTok. This is The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulet. I have been seeing this everywhere, and I wasn't initially interested until I actually took a second look at the blurb and realized that this sounds amazing. So this is a YA book, and it follows a Native American girl, and she witnesses a shocking murder, and she reluctantly agrees to be part of this FBI operation into a series of drug-related deaths. This is a YA thriller, and it sounds so good. A bunch of my friends have been cropping up having just read this because I think it only just came out, and they say it's fabulous. So this is one I'm really excited for. Then I've got Maxwell's Demon by Stephen Hall. So, story time. Stephen Hall's debut novel, which is called The Raw Shark Text, blew my mind back when I read it in 2011, I think? And it's one of those books that you can't really follow up because it's weird, it's bizarre, it's about a man being chased by a conceptual shark. Don't ask, just read it. It's so good. And he hasn't published anything in ages, but he just came out with Maxwell's Demon, which sounds like it's going to be another weird and wonderful book. This is another one I don't know a huge amount, and I don't really want to know a huge amount going in, but I do know that this follows a young man whose mentor wrote this sort of huge multi-million bestseller mystery novel and then disappeared, and now this person who was mentored by him believes that he's being stalked by the main character of that book. It sounds so good. I think that he's just fabulous. You should really pick up The Raw Shark Text if you haven't read it. Next, I have a book that was recommended to me by the bookseller in my local Waterstones. This looks really interesting. It's The Girl on the Walls by AJ News. So this is about a girl who lives in the walls of her childhood home. Think all those urban myths about people living in crawl spaces and things like that. That's what this is. So I believe we get her perspective, and we get the perspective of the person who's actually living in the house and is the legal owner of the house. This sounds super creepy. I'm really looking forward to it. It was one that I hadn't really heard of until I saw it mentioned on my local shop's Instagram feed, and then suddenly it was everywhere. So I'm very curious about this one. It's not my usual kind of thing, but I do love a good thriller. Next, I have a book I have been dying to read for absolute ages. This is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is a book that came out in the States last year, I think, and only just came out in the UK in the past couple of months, and it looks so good. I think it's quite complicated, but it's a very gothic-y, sort of twisty, mystery, sapphic book that takes place at this old school for girls in which there were 2 murders that happened, and now many years later there's a film crew coming in to do a movie about the murders and what happened, and presumably things start up again. This sounds so good. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think that this is going to be one to just plunk down on the sofa with at the beginning of a weekend and just blast through it. I've heard it's so good. So very quick background, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I started a little free library at the bottom of my building and put some of my books out, and people have been swapping books in and out throughout the entire year, which is really awesome. So I picked up this book from that little free library. It's one that I wasn't sure if I wanted to maybe borrow from the library or wait for paperback or maybe just skip it, but this happened to be down there, so I went ahead and picked it up. So this is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. He is a British kind of TV personality type. I believe he's a comedian. He's very funny. He's on this show called Taskmaster, which Scottish husband and my sister both love. I've seen very little of it. And this just sounds like a lot of fun, but it wasn't something that I was sure if I wanted to pick up in hardback or not, because I didn't know if this would be quite my cup of tea, but it sounds very fun. Basically, this follows 4 people in a retirement village who are all sort of retired elderly folks, and they meet up once a week for the Thursday Murder Club where they talk about unsolved cases. However, they end up finding themselves in the midst of an actual murder case that is going on right now. This sounds charming and lovely. I don't know if I know anyone who's actually read it, but I know a ton of people who have hauled it, so it should be a really interesting one to pick up. Then I have a kind of alternate history sci-fi book. This is The History of What Came Next by Sylvain Neuvel. This takes place in 1945 at the very end of World War II, I believe, and we have a character who's actually not human. She is an alien sort of dealing with the conflict on Earth, but also a conflict between her people, which could, I believe, bring about the end of humanity. Sounds really interesting. I've heard really good things about this author, but I don't know anyone who's read this yet, so I'm very, very curious about this. Next up, I have a book that was recommended to me by the same bookseller who recommended The Girl on the Walls. This is Last One at the Party by Bethany Clift. This sounds like a combination of things that I love that I didn't know I needed in one book. So it's a dystopian book, it's a pandemic book. I read the first little bit and I was like, this is hitting a little too close to home, so I'm gonna save it for a little bit later. But this sort of super flu, I believe, hits, wipes out all of humanity except for one woman. And before the pandemic struck, her life was kind of in shambles, and now this is kind of her chance to pull things together, and she needs to see if there's anyone else who has survived. This sounds really fun. I love books about like people getting their shit together in sort of like unusual times, and I have really enjoyed some pandemic books during the pandemic. However, this one just, the descriptions at the beginning of like when people were finding out that this was actually a really serious thing, people were going to work from home, how it was spreading, it hit a little too close to home. So I decided to not continue on for right now, but it is one that I'd like to pick up soon. I have my Goldsboro SFF book for the month of April, which is Sister Song by Lucy Holland. I've talked about this pretty extensively. It's a retelling of a British sort of bit of folklore. I've had this on several TBRs. I actually started it in a sort of review copy that I had, and then I found out that I was going to be getting this one and I decided to hold off. The writing is beautiful so far. I think it's going to be one that I love. And also, check out those edges. I love sprayed edges so much. This is really stunning. So I'm going to be picking this up again soon and sort of picking up from the point that I left off because I was really enjoying it. I just figured if I'm going to have this beautiful edition, I might as well read from this one. And last but not least is a book that I am so excited for. One of my favorite authors, and I loved his other kind of like quasi-sci-fi book that I've read. This is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I love Never Let Me Go. It's one of my favorite books ever, and I love The Remains of the Day, which is not sci-fi in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, and I'm really looking forward to this. This is his new book that just came out. I think we have like 2 or 3 copies of this book in the family because we are all massive fans. I don't know a huge amount about this one, but I do know that we follow a character named Clara who is an artificial intelligence, a artificial friend, and she's sort of observing the world and the people who pass her by. I'm really interested in this one. I'm gonna pick this one up really soon when I make some headway with some of the review copies that I have, because I think he's just an incredible writer. He's one of my absolute faves. Okay, that is it for my book haul. Sorry for rushing through this so quickly, not really talking about these books very much. In some cases, not at all. But I really desperately need to get these on the shelves. I need to get cracking on reading some of these books and sort of like wrestle my book buying into submission because this is ridiculous, you guys. I would love to hear in the comments below if you've read any of these books, or if they are in your TBR, or if you picked up anything particularly good in the month of April. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.